Southark Spotlight is brought to you by Maxwell Hardwood Flooring. Maxwell Hardwood Flooring, located in Monticello, has been producing quality, solid, and engineered hardwood flooring for over 28 years. The company and sister companies, Ouachita Hardwood and Townsend Inc. in Warren, are proud to be providing American-made flooring to distributors and retailers from coast to coast while serving our local communities right here at home. Maxwell Hardwood Flooring, your best start for a great finish.
Welcome to this month's edition of Southark Spotlight. I'm Greg Reap with SalineRiverChronicle.com, and we're very pleased today to have a friend of ours, practices law over at Monticello, but we're going to talk about a lot of things today. Mr. Paul Keefe.
Thank you for having me, Greg. I'm so pleased to be here, and I so much appreciate the public affairs programming that you're doing.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We were talking just before we started here, and really what we're trying to do is further educate our citizens, especially in this part of the state. And Mr. Keefe, we've known you for quite a while, but we appreciate you willing to come over and cross the river to come over here and visit with us a little bit today.
You bet. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Now, you actually practice with the Gibson and Keefe law firm there in Monticello.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about your background. We're going to get into it about your serving as president of the Arkansas Bar Association. That's going to be a big part of what we talk about. But can you give us a little bit of information about your own background, where you grew up, your education, and so forth?
Be pleased to. I grew up over at Lake Village on a row crop farm, but our row crop farm was a little different because we had a peach orchard and we also grew tomatoes. And so every time I come across that Saline River, I think about the Bradley tomato and how every one of them had to be packed in its own little piece of tissue.
That's right.
And that's kind of a bygone day, but I remember that so well. And we also, as I got older, I went to college at the University of Arkansas and graduated there, and then came back to the family farm. And my wife and I put in a U-pick fruit operation. So we kind of enjoy meeting people, having them come to the farm. In 1991, I left the farm and went to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and to go to law school. My wife Candy and I had 3 children at the time, and we just moved up there, and I went to law school and of course graduated law school and actually obtained a degree in agricultural law while I was there. And so I moved back to South Arkansas because I knew it was a great place to live, and initially began practicing in Hamburg for a couple of years, and then was invited to come to the Gibson law firm in Monticello. So that's where I've landed and been there for about since 1996. So you can do the math.
Well, you've been at it a while there with that firm. Now, do you live in Hamburg?
I do live in Hamburg, and the people there have honored me by electing me their city attorney, and so I get to do that. I've been doing that for about 20 years now, and that's kind of the nature of practicing law in a small town, and in South Arkansas especially. You get to do a lot of different things. If you want to specialize, you probably won't be in a small town.
Get to do a lot of different types of law.
It's never boring. That's exactly right.
Well, I'm not sure I was aware that you were the city attorney in Hamburg. Of course, as you know, I have some local government background and in my history, so that's always important to me. And I know these cities need good, competent legal counsel as they go about their business.
Well, we try to provide that, and it's it's a privilege to get to serve the people and to try to do what's best for them and help them understand why you're doing what you're doing. And usually if you explain things, people once they know the reason, they're okay with it.
I agree with that. I agree with that very much. Well, let's. Why don't we go right into the time you have just recently spent and still involved in the Arkansas Bar Association, and tell us a little bit about people hear all the time the bar association. I guess there's local bar associations and maybe the local counties or state bar association, which you were president of in Arkansas. There's a national bar association. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the American Bar Association, and a lot of lawyers around here are members of the American Bar Association. But you're correct, there are local bar associations. In other parts of the state, there may be county bar associations. Now in Southeast Arkansas, we have an association called the Southeast Arkansas Legal Institute.
Okay.
And it's made up primarily of the lawyers in the 10th Judicial District, that being Ashley, Chico, Bradley, Drew, and DeShay counties.
Right.
And it works out really well because we all practice together and we all practice with the same judges. So that's the local bar association here. The Arkansas Bar Association is a group of about 5,000 lawyers. Now it's a voluntary association. You don't have to be a member to practice law in Arkansas, but fortunately out of the 7,500 or so practicing lawyers in Arkansas, about 5,000 of them are members of our Arkansas Bar Association. And our mission is, as you can imagine, to support attorneys and advance the practice of law. And also, most importantly to me, is to promote the rule of law. You know, and that's not a new idea. In fact, the prophet Isaiah wrote, "Woe to those who make unfair decrees and unfair laws, and woe to those who deny widows and orphans justice in their courts." So it's a pretty noble idea, and I'm pleased to be part of that, both as a practicing lawyer and as the president of the Arkansas Bar Association. Some of our activities include educational efforts. We believe that if our children don't know about the rule of law and don't understand the relationship between the branches of government, they can never participate fully, and they can never have a voice because they won't know really what they're talking about. So we produce videos that are distributed statewide to school children on the Constitution and on civics and those kinds of topics. We also have a program called the mock trial program for high school students, where the students at the various high schools can put together a team and they come together and they compete, and the winner of the Arkansas mock trial competition actually goes on to the national mock trial competition. Of course, in the last year we had to do mock trial virtually.
Yes.
But just like almost everything else. And so we're pleased to do that. Our lawyers also serve people. Our young lawyers often do clinics. One that they've done recently is a Wills for Heroes clinic, where they actually go and prepare wills for first responders and for service people, because it's just a way to give back.
Right.
And another thing that they do that I think is really important, they are young lawyers, and they enlist the help of the rest of us as well, do expungement clinics. You may know that when someone is involved with a criminal offense and they serve their time and all of that, they still have a record. Fortunately, there's a provision in the law that allows someone to have their record expunged. And that's really important when that person has paid their debt, done their part, and needs to get a job so they can support the family and get back on the right track. I consider that to be actually just handing someone their life back. So that's pretty important stuff. The other thing that I think is important that our Bar Association does is we advocate. We advocate before the Arkansas Supreme Court and try to have input on the rules of court and the rules of procedure, which are very important. And then we advocate, as you well know, in the General Assembly.
Yes, sir.
We have a legislative package that we propose. Fortunately, this last year we had 4 of our 5 bills have been enacted into law. And then we also advocate on bills that are presented that we believe have an impact on the practice of law and on the administration of justice and quite frankly, all the way down or all the way up, I should say, to the rule of law. So those was the things that the Arkansas Bar Association is really all about.
So it's about further education, I suppose. It's kind of a continuing thing for a lawyer to receive continuing
Right.
education, and then these different services that are provided to those who need them, that helps them out. So you're doing a lot of good, and trying to advocate for better laws and as well
Right.
as better procedures.
You make an excellent point, because one of the things that the Bar Association does is it provides top-notch continuing legal education for lawyers. Most professionals have to have continuing education to maintain their license. Lawyers have to have that too, including at least 1 hour every year in ethics. So we're able to provide that training and that education with top-notch presenters, and we're really pleased with that.
Well, that's interesting. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are aware of some of these things, but I wasn't sure they were aware of all of them. And I thought these are the kind of things that we need to make sure people understand. The lawyers, I guess, through the Bar Association, to a certain degree, try to govern themselves.
Sure.
I know there's rules of the courts and everything that you have to follow, but and when you get to ethics and things like that, it can be very helpful.
Sure it is. We hope that our members or any lawyers never find themselves in front of the Professional Conduct Committee. The Supreme Court has a Professional Conduct Committee, which is made up of lawyers. And in fact, I happen to have the privilege of serving on that committee. I'm on one of the 4 panels, and my panel happens to be down close to the bottom, so I hardly ever get called on. But if there's a consumer or a person in the state that is concerned about the way they have been treated by a lawyer, there's an Office of Professional Conduct that they can actually call or write and express that concern. They'll investigate it, and it goes from there. Sometimes it goes all the way through a complaint. Sometimes it's resolved after some talking. And so it's a great program, and it's incredibly important. There's another thing that we support is the judges, it's JLAB. It's a lawyer's assistance program, a wellness program, and we're pleased to be part of that effort as well. I want to tell you, if you'd like, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my last year.
Yes, sir.
as president.
Please. That's exactly what we want to hear about.
I'm the 123rd president of the Arkansas Bar Association. The first president was a man named U.M. Rose, for whom the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock was named. That law firm actually celebrated its 200th anniversary in 2020. So obviously it's the oldest law firm in the state, predates statehood
Yes,
for
sir.
Arkansas. The Rose Law Firm, interestingly to me, was established by a man named Chester Ashley and a couple of other lawyers. Chester Ashley being the man for whom Ashley County is named. So, there are connections all around Arkansas and all around the state. Arkansas Bar leadership includes people from Bradley County. For example, Murray Claycomb is a former president of the Arkansas Bar Association. There's
Currently the Warren City attorney, I might add, too.
Exactly, yeah. And also there's an ancillary or related organization called the Arkansas Bar Foundation. The Arkansas Bar Foundation is a charitable organization funded by lawyers that has primarily as its business providing scholarships to law students. It's a wonderful endeavor because, education is expensive and always has been. Clint Huey was the president of the Arkansas Bar Foundation. And then there's another thing that I did a little research to write an article I thought was kind of interesting. Shields Goodwin of Little Rock was the president of the Arkansas Bar Association in the 1950s. His father was a congressman from Warren. And I didn't know there had ever been a congressman from Warren, but Shields Goodwin's father was a congressman from Warren. And of course, you go up to Fordyce and T.D. Wynn, that's Tom Wynn, and Robin
Yes.
Wynn's grandfather
Yes.
was a president of the Bar Association. Down in Ashley County, Bill Arnold of Crossett was the president of the Bar Association. And Bob Compton and Denny Shackelford from over in El Dorado
Yes.
have been presidents of the Bar Association.
You're rattling off a lot of names that I've heard
That
before.
you've heard
and
and
even
know.
a few of them that I knew personally.
Sure.
Mr. Compton I knew very well. He was a fine lawyer and a good man.
Absolutely. And so there are a lot of connections. There are a lot of connections in the law practice all over the state. I'll give you an example. The former bar president, Bill Wilson, who's now a federal judge, is married to Kathy Compton.
Yes,
And-
know them well, both of them.
You know, we're just all kind of kin one way or another, and it always makes it interesting, makes it good.
Yes.
Because we tend to get along very well among the lawyers in the state.
Well, that's interesting, and of course, I'm a history buff too, just like my son, and you were talking about the Rose Law Firm and the founder of that law firm. His statue has been one of those that's been in Statutory Hall in the national capital for many years. And for a long time, my wife used to carry students up there to Washington on a tour, and would always go through Statutory Hall, and she would always point out that statue of I believe
Right.
they called him Judge Rose, I
Right.
believe, and because he was one of the Arkansas statutes that was there to to be looked at, and
Well,
all ties in with all this you're talking about.
absolutely. His grandson was named George Rose Smith, and George Rose Smith was a Chief Justice of the Arkansas Supreme Court, and a good friend of Lamar Williamson from Monticello, who was a bar president. And so it just kind of keeps going around and around. In fact, in our law office, my partner Cliff Gibson has George Rose Smith's copy of the Arkansas Law Review. He came by one day
Wow.
on a hunting trip to Drew County, and he said, "I got these law reviews. Would you be interested in taking them off my hands?" And they made a deal, and they unloaded them out of the trunk of the car. So
Well, we could spend the whole day talking about the history of a lot of these things, because it's just fascinating to me. And that's just one other side comment. But you mentioned the Wynns, who we all know here in Bradley County, because Dr. George French Wynn, one of the sons, was a medical doctor here for 50 years, and as a matter of fact, he delivered me when I was born.
Really?
So we know the Wynns very well, very fine people too.
sure, and you couldn't mention the law and Southeast Arkansas without at least mentioning Stark Ligon, who has served for
Yes.
years as the chair of the Professional Conduct Committee.
Right.
And there's so many names, you run a risk of leaving some out. So,
Oh, I know. I'm sure we will. Stark's wife is Mary Ann Wynn,
Right.
who grew up here in Warren, one of Dr. Wynn's daughters, and one of my classmates. So you just keep going. It keeps
Absolutely.
It just all keeps tying together. But that's really interesting. I appreciate you bringing that out.
But let me share with you a little bit about the last year.
Yes, sir. Please.
At the Arkansas Bar Association, we have been, just like everybody else, inconvenienced, to say the least, by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also recognize that there are a lot of people that have been beyond inconvenienced, and our heart goes out to those people. It's a very serious time in our nation's history, and we managed to get our business done all by Zoom. We've had one live event over the last since March of 2020. We've had one live event, and that was a small dinner just for a few people in Little Rock. Otherwise, everything has been online. But you know what, Greg? We have learned how to do things better. And that's kind of exciting. We would never have decided we could have online meetings if we'd not been pushed toward it just a little bit.
I agree.
So there's a silver lining around that cloud, and we may as well recognize that. So but we've managed to keep our business going. We've actually grown in membership, and which is impressive to me because when COVID hit, a lot of people had to begin to cut back. And, one of the first things you would cut back on would be your voluntary memberships in the association. So we appreciate the support that we've gotten from them. And it's been very gratifying, and we've been able to support our lawyers. And so, as I said, we went to the legislature, we got 4 out of 5. That's not bad.
That's excellent. Good percentage.
And save some money on travel, and that's always good. So, but it's been a good year for the Bar Association, even with me as the president.
Well, I've heard nothing but good things about the job you've done, but I'm sure it was a pretty good load on you as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's a volunteer position, but it's a position. It's something. There's always something to do. And but you do that joyfully, and you're happy to get to do it, and because you're getting to help people.
Yeah. I always say sometimes folks will, I'm sure you hear it too, they talk maybe less than fondly about the legal community, but I always tell people, well, just be in a position when you need a good lawyer to help you. Because that's what it's about. Making sure justice prevails and making sure fairness prevails.
Absolutely, yeah. In my mind, lawyers are the equalizer often between the rich and powerful and the poor and powerless, and that's pretty important because that's what keeps us going. That's what we're founded on in these United States, and as I said, even further back than that. We've got some good lawyers in Southeast Arkansas. We don't have a lot of lawyers in Southeast
About how many do we have? Do you know that in the Southeast, in our judicial district?
Sure. In the 10th Judicial District, I sat down last night and just kind of made marks on paper, and I found that there were 34 private practice lawyers and 18 government practice lawyers, which gives us 52. And that sounds like a lot of lawyers until you realize that there's 68,000 people in this judicial district, and that comes up to about 5 lawyers total, our private practice lawyers per 10,000 people, and that's a shortage.
You put it in that perspective, it looks a whole lot different than otherwise, because most everybody at some point in time needs some legal help, preparing a document, certainly going to court for some reason, whatever it is, and it's important.
It's an access to justice issue. If you don't have, for many people, if they don't have access to a lawyer, they don't have access to justice. Our courts have done a lot to try to keep the doors open and make things accessible for people that are unrepresented. And it's just a complicated matter. You remember the cartoon or the commercial where the man's trying to take out his own appendix? Yeah. It's the same kind of thing, okay?
Kind of like representing yourself in court, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, there's an old saying that anyone that represents himself has a fool for a client.
I have heard that, yes, sir.
And that's kind of strong, but still, it's hard to be objective, And and I think the big thing is it's an access to justice issue, so we have things that lawyers can do. We can do pro bono work, and in fact, the Arkansas Supreme Court recently has implemented a rule where you can get some CLE credit for doing pro bono work, and that may be helpful. And there's of course the access to Justice Commission and the legal services. But you talk about thinly staffed.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
they're just underfunded because it's not a priority for the people that are making budgets in Little Rock or in
Amen.
Washington, D.C.
Yes, sir. And just in case anybody doesn't understand, when you say pro bono work, that means you're doing it for free.
Right.
You're not being paid for representing someone or helping
Well,
someone with an issue.
That's true. I really like the literal definition of pro bono. It's actually pro bono publico, and that is Latin for the good of the public. And so it's free kind of doesn't do it justice.
Yes, sir.
You know, free is free, but when you're doing something for the good of the people, that's pretty noble.
Absolutely.
You know.
Well, we're about to run out of time.
Okay.
My producer here's kind of flashed me the sign that we're getting low on time, but another minute here maybe. But anything else that you would just want to mention, either about the legal profession or about the Bar Association that maybe I just looked over and had asked?
Well, I would mention one thing about the legal profession. Since I've been in it these 27 years, they are by and large an incredibly generous group of people. They're generous with their money, but they're generous with their time. If you're a young lawyer and you have a question, you have but to call up the more experienced lawyer down the street, and he or she will help you.
Yes.
You know, and that's something that the general public doesn't recognize, because what they see when they see lawyers in action is an adversarial system. And sure, it's adversarial. That's a good way to get to the truth. But lawyers, by and large, are generous with their time and help one another. You know, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be part of that tradition. You know.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can just tell you from my own personal experience, both as an elected official, but also in private business, I've had some very good assistance from the legal community, the people that have served or worked for us in some way, and we appreciate that, because a lot of things we couldn't have done without them.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here today and appreciate this program you're doing. Appreciate the sponsor, someone making it possible.
That's right, and that's of course Maxwell Hardwood Flooring. I think most of our viewers know that, but they're good folks. Mr. Tommy Maxwell, who owns that, of course they have facilities in Monticello and Warren, both.
Right.
Manufacturing facilities. Of course, Tommy grew up here in Warren. He lives in Monticello, but they're good people and been very helpful to us in trying to help educate.
Sure. Well,
the region.
What I know about Mr. Maxwell is he has not seen a good cause that he doesn't get involved in.
That's absolutely true. Very, very generous himself and very concerned for people. So we appreciate that. Thank you again for your time. I know we pulled you away from your job today, and you're trying to get back at it again after having spent a lot of time in your position as president of the Bar Association. But we're proud of you from South Arkansas that you've had the opportunity to serve.
Well, thank you. I'll leave you with something I wrote in an article at the beginning of an article for this month's Bar magazine. Marion Wright Edelman said, "Service is the rent we pay for being. It is the very purpose of life, and not something you do in your spare time."
I like that.
Yeah.
I may have to steal that from you and use it sometime.
Absolutely.
That's a great line.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.